Following nearly 16 episodes of Bonanza, Lorne Greene threatened to resign. The show was ranked 45th and declining. He informed the filmmakers that Ben Cartwright seemed excessively aloof and insincere. The character was rewritten, and 2 years later, Bonanza achieved the second position. However, Greene's struggle continued beyond that point. He engaged in such a severe confrontation with Pernell Roberts that crew personnel were compelled to separate them. He contested with Michael Landon on the show's trajectory. Upon Dan Blocker's death in 1972, Greene asserted that the series ought to have concluded 6 seasons prior. What transpired behind the scenes? The reality is more sinister than the reruns ever depicted. Lyon Hyman Greene was born on February 12, 1915, in Ottawa. It was among the coldest winters Canada had ever experienced. The temperature decreased to -40 degrees. His father, Daniel Greene, fled Russia in 1902 after evading brutal assaults on Jews. He had a little shoe repair shop and produced only 8 owls weekly during the war. The entire family occupied a 2-room apartment at 127 Clarence Street. There resided 6 individuals. Includes Lyon's grandparents, who were monolingual in their native language. Lyon rested on a mattress constructed from flour bags filled with newspaper. In 1918, the Spanish flu ravaged the city, resulting in the deaths of 1,200 individuals in Ottawa alone. 3-year-old Lyon became severely ill with pneumonia, leading everyone to believe he would not survive. However, his grandma compelled him to ingest raw garlic and honey hourly for several weeks. Inexplicably, he endured. His mother, Dora, labored 14 hours daily in a factory, receiving a mere 15 cents per hour. At night, she collected shredded newspapers discovered in affluent neighborhoods. She employed them to instruct Lyon in reading, convinced that education would rescue him from a life of destitution. On March 15, 1922, at the age of 7, Lyon's life saw another transformation. At precisely 2:47 p.m., his father's cobbler business ignited. Defective wiring combined with shoe polish vapors ignited the premises. The fire obliterated $400 in tools and equipment, which would now be valued at almost $6,000. Daniel narrowly escaped with his life. His hands sustained severe burns while attempting to rescue his instruments. They possessed no insurance coverage. He still had an outstanding rent balance of $200. They were dispossessed and ultimately resided in the basement of the Hebrew Benevolent Society on Chapel Street. 12 families were confined in the space. Lyon rested on a decrepit army cot and began experiencing nightmares with flames and screams. The fire inflicted scars. He was raised with a fear of debt and sought to avoid dependence on a single employment source. Years later in Hollywood, similar apprehension influenced his financial strategies and led him to eschew precarious ventures. Daniel ultimately secured a $50 loan from the Jewish Loan Society and established a smaller shop. However, the family never returned to their previous state. The Lyon never forgot that defeat. In 1928, Lyon was 13 years old and enrolled at Lisgar Collegiate. That autumn, he was assigned the role of Tree Number 3 in a school production titled The Enchanted Forest. He possessed merely 2 lines, yet, he ascended the platform and presented a 5-minute oration ridiculing Ottawa's corrupt municipal government. The audience became momentarily still before erupting into laughter. He jested that the mayor was inferior to decayed timber and referenced the $10,000 scandal associated with Mayor Frank Plant. 3 board members abruptly exited, and the mayor's wife insisted that Lyon be expelled from school. He received a 1-week suspension. Nonetheless, his drama instructor privately informed him of his genuine talent. That evening imparted 2 lessons to him. Initially, he cherished the potency of performance. Moreover, politics may pose risks if one articulates opinions too assertively. In 1931, at the age of 16, Lyon experienced the severe impact of the Great Depression. The unemployment rate in Canada reached 27%. Lyon commenced exploring refuse sites and salvage yards to gather damaged wires and tubes. He aspired to construct a radio. With $2.75 saved from delivering newspapers and a plan from Popular Mechanics, he constructed a 5-tube super heterodyne radio in his family's coal cellar. His father prohibited him from utilizing the lights, thus Lyon labored by candlelight. The radio received broadcasts from Chicago and Pittsburgh. Upon hearing him listen, his mother struck it with a rolling pin. She stated that performers were inferior to circus entertainers. Still resentful regarding a relative who did not succeed in the entertainment industry. However, Lyon reconstructed it in a neighboring garage and continued to practice. Each night from midnight to 2 a.m., he recited newspaper headlines into a contrived microphone. The radio served as his refuge. Lyon graduated from secondary school in June 1933. The unemployment rate in Canada reached 30%. His uncle provided him with a part-time position at the Imperial Bank, requiring 15 hours of work per week. However, Lyon rejected it. He subsequently enrolled in an acting program at the Ottawa Little Theatre. The monthly tuition was $8. He possessed merely $23 in savings. His father erupted in fury. Their altercation was so loud that neighbors summoned the police. Lyon adopted the name Lorne after learning about Scotland's River Lorne, in an effort to establish a new identity. He financed his initial semester fee by pawning his father's gold pocket watch. That resulted in a 3-year estrangement among the family. However, Lorne had rendered his decision. In 1939, Lorne Greene commenced his tenure with CBC Radio in Toronto. He was 24 years old. He had recently returned from the local playhouse in New York. At CBC, he rapidly ascended to the position of principal national newsreader. He also devised a reverse stopwatch that assisted announcers in monitoring time during live programs. He was referred to as the Voice of Canada. However, with the onset of World War II and his perusal of casualty reports, that moniker took on a somber connotation. His grave, resonant voice conveyed the most distressing news to families across. With Canada suffering over 45,000 military fatalities, his voice emerged as an emblem of mortality. Individuals began referring to him as the voice of doom. It burdened him. The sadness was overwhelming, night after night. Ultimately, he departed from CBC to enlist in the Royal Canadian Air Force. He held radio positions, presenting wartime films such as Fighting Norway and Churchill's Island. The most recent one even received an Academy Award. However, following the war, CBC attempted to claim a portion of his external income. He declined, resigned from the staff position and transitioned to freelancing. By 1945, Lorne established a school in Toronto named the Academy of Radio Arts. He operated it till 1952. Although he earned less income from it, he aspired to assist others. His students included Leslie Nielsen and Mavor Moore. His institution provided instruction in both announcing and acting. He invested all his resources on it. In 1951, Lorne co-established the Jupiter Theatre in Toronto. It continued until 1954. They executed 15 performances, comprising 4 authored by Canadians. It became a component of Lorne's overarching objective to create something distinctly Canadian. The theatre was short-lived, however it significantly contributed to the formation of Canada's national artistic identity. Lorne relocated to Hollywood in 1952 at the age of 37. At CBC, he earned $200 weekly. He commenced from the ground up in Hollywood. He received a $3,000 theatrical scholarship from the Canadian government. However, his resonant voice led casting directors to perceive him as a villain. He declined to accept typecasting. His opportunity arose when Orson Welles listened to him deliver a monologue on a television program. Lorne invested $500 in vocal lessons to refine his accent. In 1953, he accepted a contentious position as the narrator for The Heart of Time, a documentary concerning nuclear testing. Upon discovering that the government had censored film depicting malformations in animals, he abandoned the project and forfeited his $2,500 remuneration. That move resulted in increased labor for him, yet garnered recognition from anti-nuclear organizations. In 1954, Warner Brothers awarded him a contract worth $15,000 per annum. In the crime flick Tight Spot, he sustained a nasal fracture while performing his own stunts. He continued recording. Declining analgesics. That position garnered him esteem. The film grossed $1.2 million. In 1956, he declined a $25,000 soap opera contract to accept a role in a science fiction radio series titled The Garrick Power Story, which compensated him with merely $300 per episode. He portrayed a scientist cautioning audiences regarding radioactivity. The position indicated his increasing apprehension regarding environmental issues. He conducted study at UCLA to ensure the accuracy of his facts. The series comprised just 26 episodes, although it garnered the attention of scientists and campaigners such as Linus Pauling. In 1957, he attempted to establish his own production firm, Lorne Greene Enterprises. He allocated $15,000 of his money to produce a documentary on the War of 1812. The proposal required $50,000, and NBC expressed interest until they insisted on controlling his voice work for 5 years. Lorne declined. The agreement disintegrated. He had already expended $35,000 on research and equipment. He was compelled to sell his residence in Burbank for $16,000, despite having purchased it for $18,000 3 years prior. The setback was significant. The residence signified his entrance in Hollywood. He never overlooked that lesson regarding contracts. Subsequently, throughout his prosperous years, he ensured the inclusion of provisions for profit sharing and innovative contributions. Each risk he undertook, every lesson he assimilated, every radio constructed in obscurity, and every phrase said through suffering collectively molded the individual he was destined to portray on screen. The world was ultimately prepared to encounter him. Prior to his visual debut, his voice was already recognized. During the early 1940s, Lorne Greene's resonant voice was broadcast on Canadian radios nearly every evening. He did not provide amusement, he encouraged conflict. Between 1940 and 1945, he announced the names of deceased soldiers, provided information on military engagements, and informed the public about casualties abroad. His voice was serene yet commanding, causing families to become immobilized. He was referred to as the voice of doom. Some even disabled the radio upon his arrival, too apprehensive to ascertain whether their son or brother would be next. More than 2 million Canadians tuned in each night. He was not merely a voice, he embodied the essence of anguish. Simultaneously, he was serving as a flying officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force. He was required to don 2 outfits, one for combat and another for radio operations, both of which weighed heavily on his conscience. Years later, he confessed that those broadcasts induced nightmares. In 1945, Lorne endeavored to develop a lighter product. He devised an innovative stopwatch that operated in reverse, assisting radio broadcasters in tracking their remaining time. It became a staple in studios. Utilizing the proceeds from that invention, he established a school in Toronto named the Lorne Greene Academy of Radio Arts. Between 1945 and 1952, it educated 381 pupils. Almost all, 90%, secured employment in broadcasting. Leslie Nielsen and James Doohan were 2 individuals who would attain stardom. Lorne excelled in pedagogy but lacked proficiency in business management. He expended excessive funds on the construction of the apparatus. By 1952, the institution became insolvent. He was compelled to terminate operations, liquidate the property, and utilize the remaining assets to go to Hollywood. That action nearly devastated him. Hollywood did not embrace him warmly. Between 1952 and 1959, he was repeatedly informed that his voice was excessively serious. Directors argued that he was very rigid for romantic or comedic roles. He was exclusively cast in paternal or authoritative roles. Over the course of 7 years, he appeared in only 12 television series and 4 films. It scarcely covered the expenses. He clandestinely performed voiceover work under pseudonyms to sustain his livelihood. By 1957, he was prepared to resign. However, his wife persuaded him to remain for an additional year. That extra year changed everything. In 1958, his live television performance on Studio One attracted the attention of Bonanza's producer. That opened the door, although it did not fully extend. Just prior to that hiatus, in 1958, he had a minor role in The Buccaneer alongside Yul Brynner in Charlton Heston. During sword training, he sustained a severe laceration to his leg that severed a minor artery. He required 23 sutures. With filming imminent, he concealed the injuries. He self-bandaged, ambulated without limping, and persevered despite the agony. The cut reopened repeatedly, and he had to receive secret treatments in a nearby hospital. Only his wife and his physician were aware of the severity of his condition. The infection almost resulted in his death. In 1959, he received an invitation to participate in a new Western series titled Bonanza. At the age of 44, he was presented with the option to portray either the father or the eldest son. He asked his old pupil Leslie Nielsen for advice. Leslie instructed him to assume the role of the father. He will be the focal point of the narrative. Lorne assumed the role of Ben Cartwright and entered into a 7-year contract at a rate of $20,500 each episode. The program would be broadcast in color, a rarity for that era. Bonanza debuted on September 12, 1959. It did not detonate immediately, yet Lorne was already reforming it internally. Following merely 16 episodes, Lorne threatened to resign. He stated that Ben Cartwright appeared aloof and superficial. He desired the screenplays to portray the character as more human, a genuine father, rather than merely a man with a firearm. At that time, the program was positioned at number 45 and faced the risk of cancellation. However, the writers heeded. By the 13th episode, they revised Ben's character to exhibit greater warmth and wisdom. The alteration not only preserved the program, it formed the cornerstone of Bonanza's enduring success. By 1961, the ratings ascended to the second position. Even prior to the show's zenith, difficulties arose on site. Lorne experienced significant conflict with Pernell Roberts, who portrayed his son. Pernell perceived Lorne as domineering and excessively controlling. They frequently engaged in disputes, occasionally shouting so loudly that producers had to intervene. Lorne perceived himself as a leader. Pernell perceived him as a tyrant. They were in disagreement on nearly all matters. By 1964, Lorne was receiving $10,500 per episode in addition to supplementary income as a consultant. Pernell received an identical base pay, although did not obtain any bonuses. That exacerbated the divide. Upon Pernell's departure from the show in 1965, following 202 episodes, Michael Landon quipped, "We removed one leaf from the dining table and divided the earnings 3 ways instead of 4. Lorne's advocacy for change stemmed from a profound impetus. He had witnessed excessive warfare. In episode 13 of the inaugural season, he inquired of the producer, "Why do we consistently aim a firearm at someone?" He stated the Cartwright should provide kindness before violence. A minor remark altered the show's tone. Bonanza gained recognition for its ethical teachings, in addition to its gunfights. It addressed racism, justice, and dignity. That was all Lorne's responsibility. His own history in the conflict compelled him to advocate for improvement. In 1961, his remuneration was $10,000 for each episode. However, unbeknownst to others, he discreetly allocated 20% of that amount, around $2,000 every episode, to Canadian war orphans. He conducted this covertly for years. The IRS discovered this information solely during tax audits in the 1970s. He lost his sibling during the 1918 influenza pandemic and seen numerous orphans in Europe during the war. By the conclusion of Bonanza in 1973, he had contributed in excess of $400,000. That is almost $2.8 million at present. In the 4th season, he helmed his inaugural episode. The program was titled War Wagon and was broadcast during the 1962 to 1963 season, a period when Bonanza held the 4th position in ratings. He revised a scenario for Dan Blocker to emphasize a message regarding animal welfare. Some members of the stunt crew departed the scene in protest due to dissatisfaction. Lorne remained resolute, despite the increased difficulties it caused behind the scenes. In 1964, his private life garnered significant media attention. During location shooting, he engaged in an affair that garnered media attention. At that time, he had been wed to Rita Hans since 1938, and they had twins born in 1944. The revelation of the affair astonished his admirers. His song, Ringo, ascended to the #1 position on the charts on December 5, 1964, and remained atop the easy listening chart for 6 weeks. Reached him. He contributed to the writing of an episode centered on familial values, attempting to rehabilitate his image while grappling with personal remorse. The song Ringo emerged as an unexpected success. Numerous young purchasers believed it pertained to Ringo Starr. Although it was not, Lorne still earned around $500,000 in royalties. He allocated that money to anti-nuclear initiatives. He collaborated with the National Film Board of Canada during World War II and held firm opinions regarding nuclear armaments. He even composed letters to the U.S. requesting modifications to policy. He recognized that such advocacy could adversely affect his appeal among Bonanza's conservative audience. He proceeded regardless. By 1966, a new battle was emerging, this time involving Michael Landon. Landon desired an increase in romantic narratives inside the show to attract a younger audience. Lorne disapproved of the concept. He referred to it as a superficial distraction. Landon's initiation of directing his own episodes resulted in 2 distinct interpretations of the show. A covert conflict ensued behind the scenes. Pernell had departed. Lorne now engaged in combat with another son figure on the set. The pressure was intensifying. Nevertheless, throughout that anxiety, he propelled the show forward. In Season 7, he contributed to the creation of episodes that explicitly addressed racism, such as The Wish. He ensured that Native Americans were portrayed by Native performers. He received vitriolic correspondence for it. However, the NBLACP observed. He was commended for dismantling antiquated stereotypes. Bonanza utilized its extensive platform, remaining among the top 5 shows, to address significant problems. That was the result of Lorne's actions. Lorne Greene had already achieved household name status by the conclusion of Bonanza in 1973. For 14 years, he portrayed Ben Cartwright, the formidable paternal figure in one of the most beloved television westerns ever produced. However, in 1978, at the age of 63, an unforeseen event transpired. He transitioned to science fiction. That year, he was selected for the role of Commander Adama in Battlestar Galactica. It was not merely a new position. It constituted a total transformation in his career. He was formerly recognized as a rancher leading his sons through the Wild West. He was now at the forefront of humanity's final chance in space. The original series aired from 1978 to 1979, comprising 21 episodes. However, he returned in Galactica 1980 for an additional 10 episodes. His profound, unwavering voice, formerly referred to as the voice of doom during World War II when he delivered war updates on the radio, was ideally suited for a space commander. Years prior, individuals had listened to that identical voice broadcasting alarming wartime messages via CBC radio. That demeanor of tranquility and composure persisted within him. However, Lorne Greene did not transition between genres abruptly. In 1971, during the continued success of Bonanza, he embarked on a distinctly new endeavor. He featured in a 2-hour television film titled The Harness, adapted on a narrative by John Steinbeck. In this film, he portrayed a farmer dominated by his ailing wife. It was serene, intimate, and quite unlike to his typical portrayals. The film was directed by Boris Sagal and featured Julie Summers and Murray Hamilton in supporting roles. It received a commendable rating of 8.0 out of 10 on IMDb, derived from 34 evaluations. What was more significant was how it demonstrated that Greene could transcend the role of the steady, wise paternal figure. He utilized his own childhood experiences in Ottawa, raised by immigrant parents, to authentically depict suffering on screen. Even in private, Greene was confronting challenging circumstances. He married Rita Hans in 1938, they had twins in 1944, and divorced in 1960. He remarried in 1961 to Nancy Deal and remained with her until his death. His personal triumphs and tribulations influenced his performances. Subsequent to the conclusion of Bonanza, he accepted roles that enabled him to delve into profound emotions. He appeared in shows such as Mission Impossible, utilizing his personal experiences with family and bereavement to infuse greater authenticity into his performances. He revisited his origins on radio by narrating documentaries. In the 1940s, he narrated films such as Churchill's Island, War Clouds in the Pacific, and Inside Fighting China. His profound voice was his most formidable asset. In the 1970s, he employed it once more to narrate stories, this time via environmental initiatives. He hosted Last of the Wild from 1974 to 1975, a syndicated wildlife series. He quickly discovered his most successful new project. In 1982, Lorne Greene's New Wilderness premiered on CTV. It aired for 104 episodes till 1987, coinciding with the year of his death. The program focused on the environment, wildlife, and the splendor of nature. It allowed him to articulate his passion for conservation, wildlife, and the planet. Despite his involvement in these productions, the anguish of Bonanza's concluding years lingered with him. During season 12, which was broadcast from September 13, 1970, to April 11, 1971, the series began to deteriorate. Pernell Roberts departed in 1965, and by the early 1970s, the writing exhibited a decline in strength. NBC began to exert excessive interference. The season comprised 28 episodes, although the ratings declined to 9th place. Greene believed that the essence of the performance was absent. He once remarked that working during those later years like entering a house where a death had occurred. In the final season of 1972 and 1973, Greene sought to implement a shift. He anticipated that the writers would permit Ben Cartwright to have a divorce, mirroring Greene's own experiences. However, NBC declined, expressing a reluctance to address divorce or remarriage in a family-oriented program. Greene experienced frustration. He contended that it would have rendered the character more human. However, the network was unwilling to assume the risk. That rejection exacerbated his conviction that the show had lost its essence. In 1974, Greene informed the Toronto Star that Bonanza ought to have concluded after its 6th season. He stated that subsequent to that juncture, the show deviated from its intended trajectory. Dan Blocker's death in 1972 created an irreplaceable void. NBC attempted to introduce fresh characters such as Jamie Hunter, although Greene saw it was not equivalent. The initial link between the principal characters had dissipated. The most painful aspect was the manner in which NBC concluded the episode. Greene stated that they were informed on a Monday that the concert would be cancelled on Wednesday. No one had the opportunity to compose a suitable farewell. The concluding program was broadcast on January 16, 1973, following 431 episodes. It was not even the final one they recorded. Greene envisioned a conclusion in which young Joe marries and departs into the sunset with his family. The show simply ceased. It concluded without a proper farewell. Following the conclusion of the show, Greene engaged in difficult discussions with his former castmates. During discussions over a Bonanza film in the 1970s, he expressed dissent with Michael Landon concerning its execution. He asserted that any innovation should honor Dan Blocker's legacy. Greene believed that certain subsequent TV movies failed to respect the principles embodied by Bonanza. He and Landon frequently disagreed on the show's legacy. The conflicts persisted until Landon's death in 1991. Greene died on September 11, 1987, at the age of 72, in St. John's Hospital, Santa Monica. It was not solely pneumonia. He underwent surgery for a ruptured bleeding ulcer on August 5 and thereafter developed adult respiratory distress syndrome. He was scheduled to commence filming Bonanza, The Next Generation on October 24 of that year. However, he never received the opportunity. Approximately 500 individuals attended his funeral at Hillside Memorial Park in Culver City. The chapel accommodated 300 individuals. Additionally, another 200 individuals heard via speakers outside during the 75-minute session. Michael Landon and Pernell Roberts were present. The Bonanza family reunion was subdued, however Greene's legacy persisted beyond that moment. He assumed the position of chairman of the National Wildlife Foundation. He authored Lorne Greene's Compendium of Extraordinary Animals. His television program, New Wilderness, persisted in educating audiences long after his departure. He had transcended the role of an actor. He transformed into a guide, a storyteller, utilizing his voice to safeguard the globe. The same voice that previously conveyed news of conflict subsequently sent messages of tranquility and awe to families seeing nature on television. Prior to that, in the 1940s, he was referred to as the voice of doom due to his grave and unwavering tone while delivering combat reports. However, as the war concluded and the world progressed, so too did his voice. It emerged as the voice of Canada's aspirations and subsequently as the voice of America's beloved television father. His ultimate aspiration was to reprise the role that garnered him fame, although destiny intervened. Nevertheless, his effect endures. Series such as Yellowstone with Kevin Costner as John Dutton retain remnants of what Greene produced alongside Ben Cartwright. The concept of a guy who safeguards his territory, his family, and his principles regardless of the sacrifice required. That was Lorne Greene's contribution to television. His legacy extends beyond mere replays. It resides within every robust, contemplative patriarch that followed him.